All right, so I'm Luba Vangelova, the founder of The Hub, and I am here today talking with Dr. Yong Zhao, who is a professor of education at the University of Kansas, among several other titles that he holds. And he is the author of quite a few books, including Reach for Greatness, Personalizing Education for All Children, and World-Class Learners, Educating Creative and Entrepreneurial Students. So thanks for agreeing to talk with me today, Dr. Zhao. And this is, as we were saying before we started here, it's a very strange time to be alive, and therefore a strange time to be a young person, or a parent or a professional educator trying to support a young person and their learning and growth. So I figured it would be useful to introduce some perspectives, some food for thought for people who are in the position of helping guide young people in their learning journeys. So first off, I usually like to, because my systems engineering background primarily, start with the why, the why of learning. Like before talking about the how of learning, talk about the why of learning. And so you had mentioned in the book Reach for Greatness about how personalized learning is different from personalizable education. And I think some of that has to do with the why, why are we on a learning journey? Can you speak a little bit about that and how the why kind of influences everything that follows and the differences between those two things in your mind?
Sure. Thanks for chatting with me. I think the why of learning actually is a fascinating question. First of all, human beings, learning is the only way to survive. If you're a young baby, you're born, there's nothing else you can do actually, other than trying to learn to control your environment, to develop the knowledge, skills, understanding of your environment. That's so that why, in essence, there's a natural tendency for us to learn. You cannot even defy that. Actually, it's people do learn. That's different ways. And then, of course, I think when you ask the why later, just to say, why do we go to school? That's maybe a different question to say, why do we receive education? So as adults, we try to develop a learning environment for our students. So that is, I think, the why of learning is, of course, for the development of the human being. We want you, if you have talents, if you have passions, you need to have the environment to help support and develop that. And then the third element I think is important now is that what do you want to learn? When we are born, we learn to survive, but in different families, you learn different things. But then, of course, once you go to school, what should you learn? I think that's a bigger question that right now we are all debating, is that you have governments or educational systems who prescribe what you should be learning, but that may actually be wrong. That may actually not get you what you will need to thrive as a citizen, as individual. So I think that's the bigger question to say, how do you thrive in the future? Every parent wants their children to thrive in the future. So that is where I think the distinction is. So we have right now, a lot of people buying software that supports personalized learning. It's called personalized learning. That's, I think, it's a mistake, actually. That's just no more than a learning machines, because the personalized learning follows the curriculum, force your children to learn what you never questioned, may not even be worth learning. So the personalizable education, which I wrote in the book, is really about children have the rights with the parents to determine what they want to learn and who they will become in the future. And that part of why is to say who you are, to develop, who are you? What's your innate passion? What's your innate talent? And how do we help you boost that? So that's what I think the future of education needs to go. You allow children to personalize, not to personalize it for them.
Okay. And so one of the things you had mentioned, one of the other things is that an education, though, is more than just catering to someone's strengths and interests. So can you talk a little bit about, why you wrote that in one of your books, that, you were talking just now about innate passions and strengths and so on, but I believe you had said that, a full education goes beyond that. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, I mean, a full education, I've been actually writing a new book recently, just been thinking a lot about that, is that if you think about a person I think has two parts. You have the public part, you have the private part.
Mm-hmm.
Every human being have to perform social and civic duties. And that's the civic, that's the public part. Every education has to serve that your children have to survive and live as a citizen of a community, like it or not. So you have to do that. So that's what I think government or system level curriculum can work, just as a very broad, but very basic set of knowledge, skills, understandings of the society. And that would be almost everybody has to have that. Then what will make a person thrive as individual in the new age, the fourth industrial revolution, we talk about that, or the second machine age. It is coming, the artificial intelligence, big data, all those are coming. What will make individuals thrive, successful as a person, is their uniqueness, is what you are. That's what your passion, that's what your innate ability matters. So that's why you really have two big parts. That is, in everybody, you need the basics. Of course, the basics can stimulate you into diving into something deeper, but the basics is really to ensure that we have a society, people have common understandings, people knows how to get along with each other, people knows how to participate in governments, people knows how to vote, all those kind of things. But ultimately, as an individual, if you want to be successful or thrive, you need your own uniqueness.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so some of the things that you singled out in your book, Reach for Greatness, could you just talk a little bit about that, about the uniqueness factor, and then also the agency, shared ownership, and other characteristics of the education that you think makes sense?
Well, I mean, first, let's take a look at individual students. I just think we, in a traditional education, have completely ignored or tried to ignore the divergence and diversity of our students. Students, they are the product of both nature and nurture. That is what you're born with, what your experience is. And that has been a battle for a long time. The psychologists would like to look at, well, what they know, what they're born with, and we measure them, we say where to go. The education people say, okay, we can teach you to do anything, but actually it's not both possible. So it's really an interaction between what you're born with and what your experience is. And then as a result of different talents, different passions, different experiences, we have very different students. So when students come to school, they are really truly different. But then school's problem is that we want them to be the same. So that's what we try. We try to get the students to become the same. Then you have, of course, all kinds of students not getting along with school. Students can't get along with school. Parents don't get along with school. Schools have to sort them into, gifted students, special education students. We have to set different programs. In essence, trying to make them the same. That's against human nature. We don't really need to do that. We used to have to do it, in the industrial age, because we had jobs that's of similar skills, but now it's different. So we should be rethinking about that. But then how do you support that in essence? As I wrote in the book, you need students to co-own their learning. That's really a big thing. I think I would love to see students become owners of their own learning. And of course, you cannot let them do whatever they like. So you want to have a system that enables parents and schools and teachers and students to participate in constructing what they would like to learn beyond the public good. So a personalized curriculum to say, how can you do this? Or what would you like to learn? You know, with a common agreement, you can constantly revise that. It doesn't mean you actually create one in kindergarten, you last forever. You know, it's an evolving thing, it happens. Because so once you have that uniqueness, if you are really unique, you need to be creative and entrepreneurial. So how do you apply and enhance your uniqueness by creating value for others? So that's what the second of my learning is. So you're good at something, you're really good, your unique signature strength. But how is that meaningful to other people or to the society? You know, whatever you are at, music, art, whatever you are at doing, it has to have meaning to somebody. That is, we try to solve other people's problems. Because if you are unique, you have strength, then you will have weaknesses. Other people's weaknesses are your opportunity to apply your strength. Likewise, your weakness is the opportunity for others to create value for you. The human beings become interdependent. And if we have become interdependent, we all have a life to live in essence. So that's where, you know, I was moving along, say, okay, follow the human, nature, enable them to recreate their own learning. That's called personalizable. Once, you know, you have, you know, you're constantly examining your strength, your abilities, use your uniqueness to create value for others. That's very entrepreneurial. If you create value for others, others create value for you. Hopefully, that's a better society.
Okay. And so when you talk about co-owning learning, so what does that look like on the ground? Let's say you're, you know, either a parent at home with your independent learner, or you're a professional educator working with a learner in either kind of setting. So kind of in a global sense, you know, a young person working with an adult. How does it work to co-own it? Like, how are decisions made about what to do?
Well, I mean, right now, if you look at learning today, if your children are in school, you practically have no ownership. Everything has been predetermined. So so co-owning will start from day one. You know, the students asked, what would you like to do? Why do you want to do that? You know, and what would you do to help develop that? I would say that this process is really enable students to have more than a voice, to say, okay, how would you do it? Then the parents can chime in to say, well, do you really want to do that? Well, how do you know we can do that? You know, you may have a child at home say, okay, I just want to dance. But you say, well, is that possible? You know, are you really good at that? You know, do you think you can try? Oh, our home have no value, maybe something else. And the same thing with teachers. Right now, actually, teachers, in some way, in special education, they do that kind of things, but not necessarily asking about what they want to learn. You know, special education, they have individualized education plan. You know, so that's kind of co-ownership, but the ownership is only about how to learn, not what to learn. I want to start by, you know, say, okay, what you want to learn actually needs to be in the process. You know, one of the problems, Luba, you might have noticed that after a while in school, children lose the capacity to even demand to say, I want to learn this. You know, some children have the advocacy, they need to drop out, they need to go out. A lot of times children lose that. So we want that advocacy, we want that self-determination to say, I have a role to play in my own learning. I come to school for my education. I'm not here just to do your homework.
And so I know that one common kind of, I guess, fear on the part of parents is, okay, if I ask my child what they want to do, they might say, I just want to play, I want to play video games all day. Or, you know, I want to do whatever that the parent thinks is insufficient, you know, it's not on the right track. So how does co-learn, or, you know, co-ownership then, how does the negotiation process, how does it work in practice then?
Well, in practice, I think it's the like you don't really ask them what you want to do, but what you want to learn. So for example, and then you ask them, how do you want to learn that? For example, in video games, that's a good example. I mean, really, you say, okay, there's a lot you can learn from video games
Yeah.
if you pay attention to it.
Yeah.
But a lot of children play it without paying attention. So if you can ask them, say, okay, what do you want to learn? I mean, really, when you play a video game, there's a lot. But you ask them, what do you think you're learning? How can you learn from it? And there's specific, I mean, you can be very disciplined with your children. I think actually right now, a lot of times, we as parents do not pay attention to what children are doing, how they're engaged in learning. We only look at what they are doing superficially. But video games can teach a lot. I don't know, any sports can teach a lot. But if children have the mindset of learning, that will be different. And they can say, I'm going to play with this. Then children sometimes accidentally do this. They say, okay, I want to change the video game. I want to redevelop this one. There are a lot of kids do this. I want to participate when working with other kids. But the most dangerous thing is the mindlessness. That is, you don't ask them. I mean, I think if you ask them, if you discuss with them, what your children are playing, let's say, they're watching YouTube videos all the time. But if you ask them to put in an idea to say, okay, what are you learning from it? I think the children actually do want to learn. The problem you're mentioning now happens is that right now, I think in our schools, very often our children's life has been split. Schools is learning, outside is playing. As long as I'm done schoolwork, I've done learning, then I can play. But school actually is not learning. Schools is teaching a little kind of skills and knowledge there. It feels like you are learning. As long as they're doing schoolwork, they've learned something. I don't think that's true. I think it's, we need to think about, you and me, I don't know, we are perhaps fortunate. Whatever we are doing, we are learning. I mean, honestly, you're thinking, we're playing, because we have that mindset. We want to help children develop the mindset. Learning happens all the time, everywhere. And learning itself is very enjoyable. But learning also means that you can't do the same thing all the time. If you're doing the same thing all the time, that's called, that's barely entertaining. That's just wasting your life. So if you're playing the same video game multiple times, there's something deeper you get out of it.
Interesting. I've thought about it recently that, yeah, I mean, everyone of any age is learning, pretty much, if they're alive, they're learning. But I think it's difficult even for adults. If you ask another adult, what did you learn today? I mean, I think a lot of adults would be like, I'm not sure, or, and yet we expect children, we ask children that question, we expect, a complete, sensible answer. So in terms of the learning mindset and so on, I mean, how do you kind of get around that where it's sometimes difficult to be conscious of what you're learning, or,
Well, I mean, I think, Luba, the question, what did you learn? I think it's a really bad question. You're thinking about, well, I learned about the birth date of President Trump. Really, that's not important. I think you're forcing children to pick up a piece of knowledge to say, oh, I've learned this. No, I mean, meaningful learning is really not acquisition of knowledge, but it's really the growth of the individual. You could be asking your children, what you do? And not what you learn, but what you do. Was that interesting? Was that engaging? Would you like to spend more time on that? And if you spend more time on that, and what would you expect? Just really not at the superficial question, what did you learn, but really to engage in the actual process. I don't know how many parents do this, but parents need to actually get involved. I've learned a lot from my kids, actually. We just talk about what, they're doing in the process, and so that's, I think, something quite interesting. And another thing, if you are engaged with your children, a big piece is that you follow them, you tutor each other, and you feel free to be not knowing anything about what they do, but to show genuine curiosity in what they do. And so that's, I think it's a different kind of parenting. I know most people watching this, they might be parents, but I think parents needs to engage in learning process, because I think as parents, we have arrived at the time our children can know a lot more than we do. They have access to all sorts of things which we may not have access to, or may not be interested in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm an immigrant parent. A lot of American society I learned from my children. You know?
Right. Yeah. And so speaking of that and kind of the relational aspect of learning, one thing you had mentioned in Reach for Greatness was not just learning from others, but the importance of learning for others, and how that is kind of creates some of the drive and passion and motivation. Is could you just speak a little bit about that, about the importance of that?
Yeah, thanks for picking up that pick that up, because that's one thing in learning, because we've talked a lot about learning from someone, learning with someone, but not learn for someone. I think we have been too selfish in our learning. Our children are so precious, they do their thing, but learning has to be meaningful, has to be purposeful. You know, in positive psychology, they talk a lot about relatedness, you know, and about building relationship. How do you build a relationship? You understand other people. You do something for other people do something for you. So that is learning for somebody. So when you like, you know, like your children say, okay, they come to talk to you, say, Luba, what would you like to know? You know, say, okay, I would like to cook a new meal. Maybe send your children to say, okay, go do some research, you know, help me, you know, I need your help. I've done that in my own life. When I was a kid in a Chinese village in 1970s, I read for my father to buy water buffaloes. You know, I read in I was second grade, I read something, okay, there's water buffalo here, because he was into buying that. I said, okay, here we go. My children tell me new things. So I think it's important to say, okay, learn for a purpose. And that learning is not only, again, knowledge, it's your ability to do something. I think for too long, in our schools or traditional schools, you're not going to do anything until you go to college, until you graduate from college. There was no life. Do you notice that? That is, even if the children did something, it's nothing to do with the learning. They are pumping gas at a gas station. They are, you know, in a store, but not related to their own learning process. So that's schools. I think you want to make learning relational. You want to make learning authentic. You have to learn for somebody. You know, you find someone who needs help, find somebody who needs something, then you learn about that, then you develop an application for that person. This is, again, the idea about how your uniqueness becomes valuable for other people.
Okay. And then, so moving on to more of the how then. So we're in this, you know, unique, well, we're in this point of time, living through the fourth turning and whatever, you know, different categorization schemes people are using. So there's a lot of online learning happening now, or a lot of the learning that's happening is happening online through Zoom, through whatever. So you had mentioned recently in another talk some research you had looked at some years ago about what distinguishes effective online learning. Could you basically touch on the key elements?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, right now, we look at online learning. Many people are not really examining online learning as part of natural learning. So first of all, I want to really acknowledge that online learning, hybrid learning, or flipped classroom, whatever you're doing, is just natural part of learning. So there's really no online or face-to-face. They can be all combined. So what we did, we found really online learning, big thing, you know, if you want to look at simply outcomes, interactions. You have to interact. So the interactions between the instructor or the teacher, I like to say, and the students, and interactions among students. That was many years ago, but if you look right now, today, accessing information does not need interaction. You can just go watch a recording. it is this dialogue that you can have with students that drives them to say, aha, I never thought about that. The feedback you give students says, okay, maybe you could think this way. There are alternative ways to think. It is, and students can tutor each other. I think it's very hard right now for people to move away from so-called knowledge getting. I think we need to really rethink. Students need to spend time on their own. They can go read, they can go watch. They need time to interact with their peers. They need time to interact with their audience, who they're creating value for. They need to interact with the instructors. So I would say ultimately, the interaction is perhaps the most important of the online. But how do you organize that is key. It's going to be less about telling what people want to do, but really asking good questions. Socratic model is not bad, but also now you want to say, okay, if they have something, they can ask you. But what I'm laying out, Luba, is really more of an idealistic situation, because a lot of times our students have been ruined. And so you need to really regain that piece. And how do you and I, when we chat, we're chatting about what you like to offer, we're chatting about what you're doing. So that part, whatever you're trying to teach, you should not be able to find on Google. It's really you. So if you can find something on Google, you don't need to teach that. People can access it, but then you can digest that together.
Oh, interesting way of looking at it. And what were some of the other things? I remember there were, I think, 2 other elements about time spent off task.
Oh yeah, that's a very significant piece. That is, if you want to create, if everybody is online, let's just imagine there's no face-to-face getting together. One big piece that we don't do well in online is this time off task. When you get online, people are so eager to teach, to learn. We don't yada about other things, but actually being able to chat and learn, or learning incidentally, has to do time off task. You can chat about other things. That's actually very, very important, to do. I don't know if we do that, but a lot of times, of course, parents and teachers, we have the same issues that if we are not teaching online what you should be learning, we're wasting our time. I don't think that's true. Children needs to find time to relax, to socialize, to understand. Remember when we went to school, a lot of things we learned actually did not happen in the classroom. It's outside the classroom. It's when we chat with others. That may grow you, may help you grow a little bit. So that's really, I think, important. There are many other factors, we examined, of course, we examined, like, for example, how curriculum changes, how assessment changes, but overall, online learning may be happening, but online education is not happening. So this is one thing I want to mention, that is that we need to build online education, but not online learning. Education is about growing the human beings, not only focus on teaching the subject. I think right now online learning focuses too much on the subject, what you're learning, but the growth of humanity, especially when we have COVID-19, when we're not returning to schools, socializing, interacting, conflicting, and conflicting resolution, all part of humanity that has happened on the playground. You push me, I push you, we're not doing that. How do we develop that? That's actually our education. But look at now today, I don't know about your hub, but if you go to other places, you say, well, yes, I'm learning the knowledge, I might develop the skills, but I'm not becoming a person. If the social emotional well-being, you don't say that, just children have to be their best and sitting there, their parents behind them, you learn, that kind of learning actually is not education.
Okay. And what would you say can translate adequately onto an online setting in terms of online education, and what just cannot and just requires in-person interaction?
Well, I think it's very hard. It's right now, if imagine, look at our children, what's in their life. They have to have the face-to-face in-person interaction. That's humanity. I don't think online can do that piece.
Mm-hmm.
Children just have to play. They have to play, interact. That is inevitable. They have to build their cliques and their enemies. Just that's humanity. That is not easily done online. I don't think you can do that, because another about online, if I don't like you, I just shut you off. That's it. So it's extremely hard right now. I think children are learning, if they're at home with the parents. A lot of parents basically respect their children, love their children, let children do whatever they like. Children feel like they can bully everybody, so there's really no interaction, no battle around this thing. And so I think the whole education has to do with a lot about testing boundaries, understand who we are, how we grow, how we contribute. So I don't think online can fully take place of an education. You have to get together. But online education, in bad times, you can still try what I discussed, just, more gatherings, happenings, all those things. But it can be quite dangerous, because online you can record it, people can evaluate that. When a lot of times with children don't need to be watched, don't need to be supervised. There's a lot of natural things happening that we do not actually know, and we don't want to know in many ways.
Okay. And so do you have any advice for either parents or for professional educators in how to find kind of the valuable online learning experiences, and then how to put them together in order to create, a comprehensive educational pathway, either an educator who's working in the type of program that allows for tailored, personalizable education, or a parent who's, doing independent learning, homeschooling their children, etc.
Well, I don't have a lot of advice on that, because I'm not familiar with that environment. I know a lot of online places, but there's a couple of suggestions, though, that I think work with your children means a lot. Send them as information gatherers, you as the curator, you help them to organize that. I think that's very important. And I also think the second thing, I would really encourage a lot of trust in your children. Children naturally, really, they're not bad. They are learners, and they really have a way. I think that's very important, especially for people who come to your school. And then, of course, you can use your network, adults network, to create environments as well. It's, I mean, like if it's on Google, children can search. And by the way, I would not block your children from Googling. I think a lot of parents block your children from Google, from Facebook, from all these things. No, they need that experience so they can talk with you. They learn how not to do so-called bad things. And they interact with you. I think blocking them and then suddenly say, oh, you have access when you are 18. That's really a bad mistake. That's because you really cannot block your children. So the best way is to openly interact with them, demonstrate to them, model what you do.
Okay. And so if a parent is being a curator and putting together, what they hope is a comprehensive education pathway, what would you say would be the key elements that they should make sure are part of it, and how to make sure that their child isn't missing anything vital in their education? Which usually, as one person recently pointed out to me, whenever people say that they're worried about missing out on something vital, they're almost always talking specifically about math. Like, just substitute math, for, about 99% of the worry about, will my child be behind, And so how do you, what kind of advice would you give about, when personalizing education, about how to kind of make sure that all the important bases are covered?
So I think we need to think about this. Like, the basic public stuff. That's, social, emotional, civic duties, our government, getting along with other people. So those are very important. I think math and literacy, numerous literacy actions, is interesting. I am not worried about them. First of all, if you think about math, let's talk about math. What kind of math? How much math? Do you actually can survive in this society without knowing math? You know that, right? So I'm just pushing to an extreme. So I think the first thing is that I wouldn't push too hard. There's a lot of successful people that didn't know math, as if they had reading problems. They don't read. So I'm not pushing people to be ignorant in math. I'm just saying that I wouldn't worry too much about that, but you should expose them. The second thing about any learning takes time. Some children grasp something much faster than others, and if your children are delayed in math, maybe they will get it later on. Maybe they wouldn't need it, really. I think there's a lot of people can proudly tell you, I'm not good at math, and I'm okay, So how good you are at math? I think a lot of people say, oh, God, my children is going to become a doctor, they will need math. I think that's actually a mistake. However, I would encourage parents to, the personalizable learning, remember, is not really everything about the children. It's you creating this environment. So like you were saying, what would a comprehensive environment be? You would have some math lessons, you would have some literacy lessons, you would have some government lessons, history lessons, but out of all those things, as long as they're exposed without forcing them, because if you force them, they may pretend to do it, but they really hate it. That's not what you want. You want them. So you can find different ways to entice that can change. So I wouldn't force anybody, but I would entice them. It should be part of your overall curriculum, but always build something around your children's interest and their strength.
Mm-hmm. And what about, you just touched on something that you've mentioned in the past, because sometimes, there's learning, things are learned, but at what cost? At what cost to the relationship? At what cost to the psyche? Can you just talk a little bit about that and the importance of looking kind of at the bigger picture at the cost as well as the benefits of learning?
I wrote a book about that. That's the book actually I would encourage parents to read. It's called What Works May Hurt, Side Effects in Education. I wrote a whole book. It's published by Teachers College Record of Columbia University. So that's the idea is that I think a lot of parents and teachers, we want our children to be good at everything. But the everything, how big the everything is? If you look at school, so that's why I said, that's right, you know how big that is. And everybody keep adding. We have 4 C's, 5 C's, 6 C's, financial literacy, global competency. We keep adding. And you have to be good at math, at reading, science, history, and those actually are generic terms. So I wrote this book to say, what works may hurt. It's like medicine. When you medicine is that every medicine has some side effects. And so in education, you can't expect everything to go the same ways. As I was saying that, just take a look example, your test scores versus how much you like the subject. Sometimes children follow you. You force them to learn, they will learn, they'll get test scores until maybe they're like age 13. They say, heck with it, I'm not going to do this anymore. What can you do? Then that is a negative correlation between the lifelong love for knowledge, for learning, versus school subjects. Then let's take a look at English and math. If you spend equal amount of time, you will be equally good, equally bad. But very rarely, if you want to really be good, be a mathematician, you probably have to drop English a little bit, because the time spent on math cannot be spent on English. Remember how many things we do? So, and also you have to think about long-term and short-term. Right now, I think a lot of teachers, parents have to focus on short-term, I call instructional outcomes. You're taking my class for 12 weeks, you're learning this, so you better get good at this. But then you lose curiosity, you lose interest, you lose the ability to transfer. Then that knowledge has no value other than get you good test scores. So then, but what's the lifelong outcome? Lifelong, you want your children to be happy, to be curious, to be creative, and then, but they don't have any of that. So that short term is comes at a cost. So we call that we call that kind of unproductive success. It's successful, but it's unproductive. It doesn't get you very far. I think education is one of the biggest mistakes we make in education is those short-term outcomes. They have the cognitive and non-cognitive outcomes. You know, that is, yes, you can do it, but do you want to do it? You know, a lot of the people doing research in creativity. Yes, I can create, but do I want to create? I don't want to do it. So that is the cognitive. Yeah, you can, but you won't do it. That's the same thing with reading. You know, the new reading approaches, getting kids to dig out phonetics. You know, yes, they can read, but they've lost interest in reading. Then is that worth it? So that's really a lot of things we need to think about as parents. So that book I would really strongly recommend called What Works May Hurt.
Okay. And so one thing I've noticed is in a lot of cases, or in some cases anyway, parents will intellectually agree with some of these things, but there's kind of a barrier between intellectually agreeing and then acting in accordance with that agreement. And I think sometimes, you know, there's just some kind of fear involved about the future of their children. They'll wind up in the gutter, you know, like, I don't know, just there's a certain fear. So can you perhaps maybe talk about from your perspective how to get past that, or yeah.
Well, we're fearful. I mean, I'm fearful. We're all fearful of a system because in so far, as parents, we're sending our children to go to school to get credentialed, get good grades, because we are trusting that system. We're trusting that system will never change. By delivering you a college degree, you'll get a job like this, and your payment will go like this. We're just trusting that system. But what if the system doesn't exist anymore? If the system collapses, you know, there are many reasons that system can collapse, actually has been collapsing. You know, if you look example right now, college graduates, underemployment is huge. You know, with or without COVID, you know, if you have 50% of college graduates not getting their payment, not doing a college graduate's job, that's collapsing. You know, the credential inflation has been happening for a long time. This is why a lot of the charter schools, I think they make a mistake. You know, we have now over 90% of parents want their children to have a college degree. If you have 90% of the population have a college degree, there are not 90% of jobs for you to do. And then what do? You go get a master's, then you go get a PhD. So that is not going to work. That's first thing. Second thing, technology changes. Is forcing the system to collapse again. You know, look at Google comes up with the career credentialing. You learn for 4 to 8 weeks, you make $60,000. That's kind of threatening this, you know, the college as well. So there's a lot of things. I'm only talking about economics, but I think there are many other reasons for us to say, okay, we got to do something. Every human being, how successful you are as a person economically or as an individual really relies on how well you manage your own life. I'm sure you as a parent, you know, you decided to do certain things, you had a reason to do it. But a lot of parents, a lot of adults, they don't have a mindset, I got to go do something. I can change. I've seen so many people in life now, they're really making changes. So you have the mindset, you have to own your own life. You have to say, if a child takes responsibility for their own life, that's a big, big deal. And that is actually, so that's why, you know, from early on, kindergarten on, learn for somebody is very important. So this fear is you're relying on the system. If the system is shaky, it's changing, you can't rely on it, you have to jump out of it.
Okay, and so let's say, you know, a parent or a professional educator or the two of them together are coming up with a comprehensive education pathway or helping curate a comprehensive education pathway with a young person. So then what about the last step, which is how to assess the effectiveness? And I mean, the one thing about standardized tests is even if there's no value in a particular thing, like it's something you can see, it's something, you know, like you can see a score. It's how do you assess if a human being is developing and is on the right education pathway, or if some tweaks need to be made, or, you know, whatever.
Well, if you first of all, I mean, like standardized testing, they're basically judging you against other people. So that's just whatever they use to judge you against. It's kind of meaningless because, you know, as I said, you know, and also you're solving existing problems with existing answers. You're memorizing. You're just applying that. So I'm not going to really deal with that. But you know, you're talking about assessment. Assessment is, in essence, I will look at what works students create. And you know, if you look at your, let's say, learning to write novels, and you say, okay, maybe January 1st, I have a student writing a piece of novel, and toward the end, they write another piece. You compare that, you know, you will see the change. If you're interested in creativity, confidence, you kept asking them, well, what's your confidence in writing a novel? Okay, let's try that. You kept asking, understanding that process in conversation. Because when we talk about uniqueness, what makes a person unique is what you do, what you've done. You know, like I think I mentioned this to you, Luba, before about the Mastery Transcript Consortium. You know, this consortium is creating a different transcript for universities to admit students. And this one talks about competency. This one highlights what you're good at, highlights what you've done, allows students to manipulate in the evidence of that. So you're looking at evidence. I would rather look at if I want to admit students, I want to see what you've done. I want to see, you know, not your test score. I want to see, why are you doing this? What have you done? And show me some of writings. Why do we, you know, when you go apply for a job, people ask you, what's your portfolio? What did you do? That actually matters a lot more. And also today, given the technology, it's much easier for employers, if you still want employers, to find out what you've done. And you can show them, you can tell them what they've done. So that's actually important to think about. I mean, in terms of learning, I don't think you can apply rubrics. You know, traditional parents apply rubrics. Oh, this is perfect, this is second. You just pretend to do that. You know, really, children's new learning has a lot of element of creativity. If they're creating something novel, something new, there shouldn't be a standard, but you have a general passion. Like, for example, if your children are into art, they're doing painting, always get to a professional to say, hey, how's that? They can always give you feedback towards that. So I would say assessment is really feedback, assessment is recommendations, and then you always try to build. I would love to save children's writing every year to see how much progress they've made.
Mm-hmm. And what about in areas that you don't feel qualified to judge yourself because it's beyond your knowledge?
That's where you get expert. There's a lot of people online. I'm sure you can find them if you spend time. That's a part of a curator. You curate some experts, pay them some money, and they will help you judge. They will help you do that. You can do that in actually almost every domain now. I think, you know, even in physics, you can find someone, you know, they'll be able to do it.
And just one other thing, there's a lot of still kind of conflating learning and education with taking classes, as opposed to like learning in an informal way through conversations, through like doing things kind of in all the many informal ways there are to learn things. So how would you kind of look to balance, like would it concern you at all if you know there was a lot of informal learning happening, you know, versus like kind of class-based? like, is there anything that you would look for in terms of balancing informal, formal, or is that just kind of a feel good thing because of what we grew up with, and so we equate that with
Well, I think learning in a class is mostly a waste of time. I don't know about you. I've taken a lot of classes, so I've tried to not taking classes. You know, if I want to go read something, I read it. If I want to watch something, watch it. If I want to talk to an expert, I go talk to an expert. But you know, for a lot of people, you know, if they're comfortable taking a class, they can take a class. But you know, right now a class is for a lot of different people, you know, so many people are in a class. So a class may be meaningful if you're in a specific subject to lay a foundation for you to explore. But if you treat everybody as an investigator, every student as an investigator, and the student can organize on their own. They can find a class, they can skip a class. And like same thing, we have a book, you skip a few chapters, few pages. I was just more interested in the learner finding ways to learn. It's a class also is for the benefit of a system. You know, oh, you've taken this class, you've sit in this class, but you know, a class is not always meaningful. So I'm not concerned about that, you know, taking or not taking a class. I think, you know, some people may be worried, oh, my children have to develop into this pattern, taking a class, go to this one. I personally am not worried about that. It's especially if you count how much time students waste, you know, in a class. But there's one more thing I just want to emphasize. Children's learning time is their life. Remember, children are living a life, even when they go to school, taking classes, and that life is worth living. So I hope parents do not get the idea, we'll torture our children for 12 years, then they can go have a better life. I want us to treat our children as living human beings who are living a life.
Okay, thank you. That seems like a good note to end on. Thank you so much for taking the time today. And I think there's so much to talk about here. I think we might have to schedule another conversation down the road.
Yeah, I love talking to you. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Okay,
Thank you,
great.
Dr. Zhao.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Okay, take
care.
care.
Best wishes. Bye.
Okay, you too. Bye.